What's up guys, it's Mars from Audio Judgment and today we're gonna talk about OffAxis Response. Why? Because I moved into my own house for a couple of years now and it's time to set up an audio system. I made some speaker boxes in the past, right? Easily enough, I'm going to use those. Do they sound good? Not really. Many believe that if you have high-end speakers, you automatically have great sound. However, the acoustics of your room will absolutely destroy the sound if it's ignored completely. What concerns my living room, I have a severe case of good luck setting up an audio system there. If you are a normal person and don't have a dedicated listening room, you will place the audio system beside your TV. Behind my TV sits some large tiles made of some sort of synthetic material, highly reflective. On the left side, we have a corner. On the right side, we have an open space. So uneven side reflections. On the left wall, we have floor-to-ceiling windows, again, highly reflective. On the floor, I don't have any carpets, so no absorption. The curtains are the only thing that helps in this regard. Also, the distance from the TV to the couch is not that great. Moving the speakers away from the wall, which is something that will help acoustics, is not something that can be done without making the room look awkward. So we established that the room is trash for music listening. You know what else makes things worse in an untreated room? Speakers with poor OffAxis response. Now I have to admit that OffAxis Response wasn't something that I particularly focused upon. There are some guidelines that will increase the chances of good OffAxis response. Here's a few. Make sure that the speakers are as close as possible. Choose a lower frequency for the crossover point. Make sure that the speakers are in phase at the crossover frequency. Now I don't have an idea what's the OffAxis response of this speaker, but we will find out today. So first of all, what is on-axis response? Basically, you set the microphone to tweeter level, usually 1 meter away, and do your measurement. This is the on-axis response or 0 degrees. Off-axis response is when you move the microphone on an arc to the left or to the right. The angle you form between 0 degrees and the new position is how many degrees off-axis the response is. For example, 15 or 30 degrees off-axis. If you do these measurements in smaller increments, you will get a better idea of the off-axis response. If you have a symmetrical speaker, as in your speaker drivers are centered on the baffle, you don't need to do left and right measurements. One side is enough. If you have offset speakers, then you need to make left and right horizontal measurements because they will be different. In this case, we have an off-center tweeter and left and right measurements are needed. The thing we just talked about is the horizontal off-axis response. We do have vertical as well. For vertical, people like to simplify things. Basically, they move the microphone up or down by 10, 15, 20 centimeters and call it a vertical off-axis response. However, if you want to do it by the book, you need to move the microphone on an imaginary arc vertically. Much easier said than done, but there is a workaround. When doing horizontal off-axis measurements, instead of moving the microphone, just swivel the speaker by how many degrees you need. And for vertical measurement, lay your speaker on its side and again, swivel it by how many degrees you need. To easily get the speaker on the desired angle, normally you would use a special motorized turntable. However, these are not cheap because they need to withstand large heavy speakers. There are, however, some DIY solutions out there which will keep the budget down, but involves 3D printed parts and some programming knowledge. I propose a simpler method because you're probably not going to do this for a living. It takes more time, but you need a simple and cheap tool. A digital angle finder. We're going to measure this floor standing speaker, but the process is the same for a bookshelf speaker. We need to lift the speaker off the ground, and I'm using this small stool. The idea is to keep the speakers at equal distance from the ceiling and from the floor. It's very difficult to do with a floor standing speaker with multiple speakers. It's easier for a bookshelf speaker on a speaker stand. In our case, it looks like the port is closer to the floor compared to the top speaker and the ceiling. As a result, the earliest reflection will bounce off the floor. This doesn't really matter, I'm just telling you this because this means that we will have a short reflection-free window. In conclusion, we will have a measured anechoic response from maybe 400 Hz to 20 kHz. If you have a taller room, lift your speaker upwards and you will probably have an anechoic response down to 250 Hz. The rest of the frequency spectrum is corrupted by reflections. Now that we got the theory out of the way, let's go to our setup. Set the microphone at tweeter level 1 meter away. Make sure that the microphone is perpendicular to the speaker. I have laminate flooring and I use the joint lines as reference. I find it easier to align the angle finder if the speaker is placed at the edge of the stand. In this setup, do your first measurement, which will be your on-axis response. Now we will continue with the vertical off-axis measurements. And I'm going to do the lazy approach and just move the microphone upwards and downwards. Do how many increments you like 5, 10, 15 centimeters upwards and downwards. I'm just going to do 15 centimeters up and 15 centimeters down. Ideally, you want to keep the microphone in the same position, lay the speaker on its side, and I'm going to demonstrate with the bookshelf speaker so I don't break my back. And just swivel the speaker by 5, 10 and 15 degrees to the right and another 3 measurements to the left. This is the correct way to do it because you want to mimic an arc pattern. So we took our vertical off-axis measurements and now let's get to the fun part for the horizontal measurements. Return the microphone to its original position at tweeter level. Now let's head to the speaker and try to swivel it to the correct angles 15, 30 and 45 degrees. Some like to measure 60 and 75 degrees as well, but 45 is aggressive enough for me. Get your angle finder. I suggest you get a plastic one as a metal one can and will scratch your speakers. Set it at 90 degrees and reset it to 0 in that position. Now incline it until you read 15 degrees. Set one side of the angle finder against the stand and the other against the speaker. Now swivel the speaker until there are no gaps and the angle finder sits flush against both surfaces. When you are done with the alignment, just do your measurement. You will repeat the same process for the rest of the off-axis angles you intend to measure, in our case 30 and 45 degrees. Also, since this speaker has an offset tweeter, we need to do another 3 measurements on the other side. After all the measurements are done, we can take a look at the measurements that we just did. Keep on the graph for the on-axis measurements since that will be our reference, and compare it to the rest of the off-axis measurements. We already applied the reflection-free window, so the response is from 400 Hz and up. Let's start with the vertical measurements. With the microphone downwards, there is no obvious deviation, so very good response. But for the upwards measurements, we can see a dip at 3.5 kHz. This might be something to look at or be aware of. Now for the horizontal off-axis measurements, 15 degrees is super clean, 30 and 45 start to get worse and worse. I mean, that's pretty much what you expect to happen. To me, it looks pretty okay-ish. I've definitely seen better, so this definitely can be improved. If we compare left and right off-axis measurements on the same swivel angle, we can see that there are differences, though pretty minimal and nothing to note about. Now, I'm pretty curious if I can improve this speaker. If I were to build this speaker again, I would make some changes to the box and after that the crossover. Even though the box is done, you can still bring improvements. And regarding the crossover, you can definitely start from scratch and build a new one. So this is exactly what we're going to do in the next video. I'm going to take this speaker and try to make it better. Improve what can be improved with whatever methods we have at hand. If you're curious about that, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. And I'll see you next time. Peace!